Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of our Explainer. Today, we're undertaking a tactical briefing on the Designing Cisco Wireless Network certification. Specifically, we're looking at the 300-110 WLSD V1.2 exam. Now, if you're prepping for this, you already know it's a rigorous 90-minute test of your design capabilities. But listen, we aren't just going to sit here and reread the syllabus to you today. No way. Instead, we're using this explainer to identify and neutralize the biggest exam traps hiding right there in the official blueprint. We'll be breaking down everything from survey tool selection all the way to the incredibly complex intersection of mobility roaming and high availability failover. Here is our tactical map for today. 1. Decoding the blueprint. 2. Site survey tools. 3. Infrastructure, AI-RRM and RxSOP. 4. Mobility and HA collision. And finally, 5. Final strategy.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, decoding the blueprint.
When you look at the official Cisco documentation, you'll see right at the very top that this is a 90-minute exam. Why does that matter? Because 90 minutes is literally no time at all to design a network from scratch. That tells us right away that the exam isn't just about rote memorization of textbook definitions, right? It's about rapid, true design comprehension across 4 totally distinct domains. You need to be able to look at a scenario and instantly know exactly which design principle applies. Check out the official exam weights. Notice that wired and wireless infrastructure is the largest chunk at 30%. But look at the rest of it. Site survey and mobility are tied at 25% each, with WLAN high availability holding a really solid 20%. The spread here is relatively even. You absolutely cannot afford to skip or skim a domain, because a weakness in high availability will sink your overall score just as fast as a gap in your site survey knowledge.
Moving right along to Section 2, Site survey tools.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Cisco specifically categorizes its tools in Section 1.7 of the blueprint. They explicitly separate predictive planning software from physical RF spectrum analyzers. The trap here? Confusing the use case. If an exam question asks you to evaluate key network metrics before a physical deployment, you are reaching for planning tools like Ekahau or Hamina. But if you need to perform a Layer 1 site survey to analyze raw RF energy or interference, you must select Channelizer or a Spectrum Analyzer. Do not mix these up.
Furthermore, when you're out there using those site survey tools, whether it's for a pre-deployment, post-deployment, or a predictive survey, the blueprint demands that you evaluate specific constraints. You aren't just placing access points for basic coverage anymore. You've got to account for client density, real-time application needs, specific AP and antenna types, and the overall deployment type. Are we talking simple data, location tracking, voice, or video? And you have to do all of that while maintaining security. Your survey tool selection has to align perfectly with measuring those exact constraints.
All right, Section 3, Infrastructure, AI, RRM and RxSOP. Let's talk about radio resource management. Section 2.3.A explicitly lists RRM, including Cisco Catalyst Center AI-Enhanced RRM. Guys, this is a huge hint. Cisco doesn't want you to just understand legacy RRM anymore. They are heavily testing your knowledge of modern integrations. You need to know how AI-Enhanced RRM uses advanced telemetry and analytics through Cisco Catalyst Center to dynamically optimize the RF environment over time. It's not just reacting instantly to some localized interference spike anymore. Then we have RxSOP, or Receiver Startup Packet, which is called out in Section 2.3.C. Honestly, this is a classic exam trap. Candidates so often memorize what RxSOP stands for, but they completely fail to connect it to its design purpose. Section 2.5 requires you to design high-density wireless networks. Well, how do you achieve high density? You shrink cell sizes so access points don't hear clients that are too far away. RxSOP is the precise RF profile feature you use to artificially raise the listening threshold of an AP to manage those cell sizes. You've got to connect those dots. Real quick, before we leave Domain 2, let's rapid fire through a few other specific callouts that candidates constantly trip over. You need to confidently determine logical licensing requirements for wireless LAN controllers and APs. You absolutely must distinguish the design differences between a voice and video network versus a location tracking network using Cisco Spaces. And don't forget Section 2.6, know your wireless bridging mesh modes of operation, Ethernet bridging, and the specific roaming behaviors of workgroup bridges, or WGBs. Let's move on and see how this builds. Section 4, Mobility and HA collision. Looking again at the official guidelines for domains 3 and 4, We see mobility makes up 25% and HA is 20%. But here is the absolute secret of the 300-110 exam. It does not treat these domains in isolation. The hardest, highest scoring design questions, they are going to test how these features interact during a failure. Just imagine this scenario. It's kind of like a final boss battle. You have a client actively roaming between access points to optimize its connection. That tests domain 3.2. Suddenly, you have to validate the mobility tunneling for the data and control paths across a mobility group, testing domain 3.3. But wait, precisely at that exact moment, the primary wireless controller completely fails. Now domain 4.1b kicks in. How does controller stateful switchover or SSO handle that active mobility tunnel? If SSO fails, what are the AP fallback triggers to secondary or tertiary controllers, as tested in domain 4.2b? This step-by-step collision is exactly how a master designer thinks, and for sure it's exactly what the exam will ask you to solve. To survive those really complex scenarios, you have to clearly differentiate your high availability designs. Controller HA and access point HA are tested entirely differently. For the controller, you're designing around link aggregation groups, stateful switchover, controller priority, and anchor redundancy. But for the access point, the focus shifts entirely to AP prioritization, strict fallback assignments for primary, secondary, and tertiary controllers, and utilizing embedded wireless controllers. You need to keep these toolkits distinctly separated in your mind. Okay, bringing it all home with Section 5, Final Strategy. So the crucial point is this: success on the 300-110 WLSD is not about reading a textbook from cover to cover and just hoping you remember the definitions. It is all about actively connecting the domains. You must see how an ECHA site survey directly impacts an AI-enhanced RRM configuration, or how RxSOP cell sizing affects an active roaming client during a stateful switchover event. Avoid the traps by knowing exactly which tool or feature solves the specific design constraint that's being presented to you. I want to leave you with this final thought as you hit the books for your final review. Ask yourself honestly, are you just memorizing bullet points about features? Or can you actually design a high-density wireless network that smoothly survives a primary controller failure right in the middle of a critical client roam? When you can confidently answer yes to that question, you are fully ready to conquer the 300-110 exam. Good luck with your studies and keep designing.